Back in January, Epitome Energy of Red Wing, Minnesota announced plans to build a $150 million soybean crushing plant at Crookston, creating hundreds of jobs, likely producing vegetable oil, soy meal for animal feed, and biodiesel. However, Monday night, Crookston's Mayor Guy Martin shocked the city council and resigned, saying in so many words, the city is moving ahead too fast in supplying funds for the project. So far, the city and Cheetah, its economic development arm, have committed $250,000 to the project. A project that Crookston taxpayer Bryant LaPlante says rests on shaky ground.
Guy Martin, the mayor, quit. He told me in an interview basically that the city's moving too fast and handing over city money to this Epitome Energy plant. $150 million proposal to produce a soybean crushing plant to produce what, three elements?
It would be probably veggie oil, soy meal, and biodiesel.
Okay. So what do you think of this?
I would be agreeing with Mayor Martin that it's important to gather all the information and move cautiously with this. Last night I was going to present threats that exist, as you would in a business plan, threats that exist to the biodiesel industry and also the internal combustion industry. They're tightly related in the future. I was denied being allowed to present information last night.
Okay. You think the city is going too fast also?
Yes.
And why? What's the problem?
The problem exists that there's three major threats that exist for the industry. If you're not aware of these threats and you're not taking it slowly, there's a lot of risk involved for a biodiesel plant. We've had 5 biodiesel plants shutter in the United States since just July of this year. Experienced operators are having a tough time in the industry. So the first threat that exists that's short and intermediate term is that there's relationships that exist that determine the price of soy oil and biodiesel. And they have nothing to do with the United States. They have to do with China and Brazil. So when Chinese economy is growing strongly, the Brazilian real increases in price, soy oil increases in price, and so does biodiesel. And the opposite is true. So when the Chinese government growth rate slows down, the Brazilian real drops way down in value. Okay. Soy oil drops in value, and so does biodiesel. So China's sitting at a near 30-year low in its growth rate. No turnaround really seen in sight with trade wars and tariffs. And Brazil is going to be ramping up its soy production 30% in the next 10 years.
So small towns, big towns everywhere, economic development commissions just love to, let's get this big plant in here, and oh my, here's 100 new jobs. But nothing's set in stone that would actually happen.
Quite likely that in the next 3 to 5 years, that could be a very dangerous proposition. My advice to Crookston and any other city, you're best off actually waiting 3 to 5 years. Let the surpluses, the world ending stocks of soy oil, soy meal decrease. And at that time, take a look at it. Because the second major threat that exists in the industry is that the Energy Information Administration tells us last year, the 100 or so biodiesel plants that are still in operation are only operating at 72% of capacity.
Okay.
So a primary threat to this biodiesel operation or anyone in the United States is that you're going to open a crush oil biodiesel plant at a time when the 100 plants that exist are only operating at 72% of capacity. So even this year, maybe only 75% of capacity.
Okay.
Yep.
So the city should slow down and take a closer look?
Absolutely. The third threat that exists that everyone's going to have to look at, no matter what your fuel source is that the Paris Climate Agreement was signed by 18 nations. That agreement has with 18 nations that there is a phase out of all internal combustion engines. China, India, and South Korea are 3 of those nations. They account for probably half of our population in the world. And their phase outs, depending on the nation, begin starting in 2020. And most of them end by 2040, all internal combustion engines phasing out. So it's not just a threat to diesel, biodiesel, ethanol, gasoline. They're all under threat. Internal combustion engine manufacturers already beginning the process of converting over to hydrogen fuel cells, electric vehicles, and such.
All right. So Crookston beware?
Crookston beware, slow down. Slow down. It's critical to slow down. And make sure, first of all, that you have enough private investment before we move forward with more taxpayer dollars.
Okay. All right, thanks for talking to me.
Thank you, Neil.